Joining me for a look at the pros and cons, the strengths and the weaknesses is Martin Fletcher, columnist and former foreign editor for the London Times, and Fraser Nelson, the editor of the UK Spectator magazine, which Boris Johnson once edited himself. So, gentlemen, welcome to the programme. First, I described it as a primary. I'm not sure whether you agree, but you know, we've heard since 2016 that Brexit is the democratic will of the people, even though it's a very close vote, and it has to be implemented. And yet here is less than 1% of the Tory party about to select its next leader and next prime minister. How democratic is that?
Well, this is the British system. If you look, the last 5 British prime ministers, 3 of them came to power in this way. Of course, it's not very democratic. We're talking 160,000 Tory party members get to choose the leader for the whole country. But in our parliamentary democratic system, that's what you do if one of the prime minister falls over midway through. I mean, there will be a general election. These leaders always tend to seek their own mandate. With Theresa May, it didn't work very well. But these are exceptional circumstances. We've got until the end of October, the EU has given us, to sort this out. And so when Boris Johnson, if he does come to power, he'll have 99 days to come up with a solution that eluded Theresa May in 3 years. So these are anything but ordinary times.
They are, and I said 1% of the party. It's obviously 1% of the country, less than 1% of the country. So let's just, we saw that little setup package. Who is Boris Johnson? I mean, he is somebody who himself has said, in answer to a question about, you know, what are his political convictions? Basically, he said, well, you know, a driving conviction, but that was a long time ago. What does he stand for, Martin?
Well, first of all, he's a brilliant wordsmith and he's funny, so people like him. But he uses his gift with language to deceive, to dissemble, to dupe and to distract. At heart, first of all, he's a newspaper columnist who's paid to provoke and to be colourful. And there are no consequences, or very few consequences, to what he writes. That doesn't qualify you to be Prime Minister. I think he's disqualified on 2 grounds. Firstly, his political record, and secondly, his character. His political record consists of 2 years as Foreign Secretary, which were pretty wretched. I mean, by common consent, he was one of the worst Foreign Secretaries we've had. It was 2 years characterised by gaffes, by gratuitous insults at a time when we should have been building ties, and by guff about global Britain. Character-wise, he is a congenital liar. He's a serial philanderer. He's utterly untrustworthy, disloyal, as his former wives and a succession of Tory leaders will tell you. He's lazy. He thinks he can wing it, bluster his way through. This is not a man fit to occupy an office that was once occupied by Churchill and Thatcher.
So not a Boris fan, and let's just add for facts, he was fired from the London Times and he was fired from the Telegraph, I believe.
No, he was fired from the London Times for making up a quote. He was then fired as art spokesman for lying about one of his several affairs. OK, so that's the record there. I mean, look, Fraser, you occupy the position he used to occupy. I mean, Martin's kind of right.
Well, Martin didn't tell you a whole part of the story. What Martin didn't say was he was twice elected the Tory mayor of London, a Labour city, the largest personal democratic mandate in Europe. Nor did Martin say that against all odds, he won the Leave referendum. He won more votes, 17.7 million, than anybody has won for anything in the history of his country. So yes, there is a side to Boris which his detractors will focus on, but they always airbrush out the incredible achievements he's had. And when it comes to it, when you look at what David Cameron had achieved, what Tony Blair had achieved before they became Prime Minister, it was as nothing compared to Boris's record, not just of electoral success, but of administrative success. London is a city of 10 million people. That is more than a lot of European countries. Now, sure, I'm not going to say that Boris is a saint. I'm not going to say that his personal life is beyond all reproach. But if you think that all he is a philandering, deceiving journalist, then you're deluding yourself and not understanding why he's so popular.
So we'll get back to the character in a moment, but what I want to understand is this. We have gone through 3 years in this country unable to get Brexit through. We didn't hear anything in the debate. Now the contest has been whittled down. Rory Stewart is out. There's only 4 left in the contest after the latest vote. Boris is the front runner. We did not hear him guarantee that Brexit will actually happen on the 31st of October, deal or no deal. And this is an issue because he's meant to be convincing people that he can unite the party, get Brexit through, and basically, you know, seek those sunny uplands that he's already... Or are we not worried about that?
Yeah. Boris promises whatever it takes to get elected. Or to win a referendum. So the reason Brexit has not been delivered after 3 years is the promises he made during that 2016 referendum campaign were undeliverable. He says you can have your cake and eat it. You can't. You cannot.
That is actually one of his slogans. I'm pro-cake and pro-eating it.
But you cannot have all the advantages of being in the European Union if you're leaving it. And now we're seeing exactly the same thing. He's saying that he is going to force the EU to give us a better deal, or he's going to withhold our £39 billion, never mind divorce payment. Never mind that that's, you know, illegal. He cannot do that. First of all, the EU will not negotiate with him because most European leaders detest the man and they don't trust him. Secondly, he says that if we don't get a better deal, we're going to crash out. The Parliament won't allow that. So, you know, we're back into a general election or a referendum, probably a general election.
Okay, so this is actually very important. Where is the Parliament now? I mean, will they not allow a crash out? Are they still firm on that? And what about a general election? One of the things that people like yourself say, and the party membership and the grandees, is that Boris can unify the party. It's all about party, party, party. And the latest polling is really scary. It basically says that majorities in the Conservative Party are willing to see Northern Ireland spin off or reunify with Ireland, Scotland spin off. They're even willing for a big economic hit just to get Brexit done. Is that where we're headed?
No, I don't think it's where we're headed at all. Most people who vote Leave will tell you that they know there might be an economic cost, but to them, greater issues are at stake. It's about sovereignty, control, democracy. And when it comes to like what Boris is likely to do, I mean, Parliament, for example, doesn't like the idea of no deal. Of course it doesn't. But can it stop it? It's an open question as to whether the mechanisms exist. Of course, they can have a general election. It would take something like 6 Tory MPs to vote to bring down the Tory government, to force a general election and to stop no deal from happening. But given that Jeremy Corbyn would most likely win that election, will you really find 6 Tory MPs who will effectively put in Corbyn, thinking he will find a solution that the Tories couldn't? So I am not as 100% certain as others that Parliament will block no deal. I think they'll certainly try to, but they tried last week and that failed. So it's a more open question. And if there's a leader with momentum, and remember, all we need to get a deal with the EU is just 1 or 2 sentences agreed at the end of this deal. We are incredibly close. Now, I am not so sure that the EU is so unwilling to compromise that it wouldn't give the very small distance that we need to come to an agreement here. I might be an optimist, I might be a bit too Europhilic for my own good, but I do think there is a common sense deal to be done.
Well, there was, and apparently it didn't get through Parliament. And I spoke to Angela Merkel, I mean, the de facto leader of Europe, and they have no appetite for reopening, and particularly the Northern Ireland border, which was kind of given short shrift in the debate last night.
It's not about reopening, though. It's about just adding a simple exit clause, which is in most modern treaties. An exit clause is in NATO. An exit clause is in EU membership. If there were an exit clause to this agreement saying either party could serve notice in 2 years, then it would pass Parliament. Is that an unreasonable request? In this day and age, it's not. So I think that is a potential for compromise.
So, I mean, you were saying, Martin, that the European leaders would be very frustrated if it was Boris and not inclined to be kind. I mean, let's face it, he started his journalistic career essentially making a whole load of stuff up, as he admits himself, chucking stones over the channel and listening to them crash the greenhouses here back in London. You know, he made up stupid stories that were lies about fake banana sizes and the sizes of condoms and all sorts of things which weren't true, but they were entertaining. And now he has to go and talk to these people who didn't like him as foreign minister and are not going to like him as prime minister if he thinks that he can, which is what he says, beat them over the head with a baseball bat.
I mean, I was a victim of Boris in this sense, that I was the Brussels correspondent of the Times from 1999 to 2002, and I suffered from what he had done. He, in his 4 or 5 years as Telegraph correspondent, virtually created Eurosceptic journalism. I once spent several hours sitting in the British Library going through his stories. It was a tsunami of mendacious stories that had only the most tangential relation to the truth. But they came at a time, and the common theme was the European superstate ganging up on poor defenceless Britain, 27 scheming member states out to do us down, destroy our ancient liberties. That was the tenor of it. It played into a sort of simmering Euroscepticism in the Tory party, and it took off. And most British newspapers thought, this is wonderful, this is good, colourful, fun stuff coming out of Brussels, much more interesting than the usual grey stuff. It was impossible to get a positive story about Brussels into the many British papers for a quarter of a century. The idea that Britain was a big, powerful, influential member of the European Union, and when it engaged, it won the arguments, and it set up the single market, and it won the arguments on expanding eastwards and competition policy and much else besides. And when it didn't, on the euro and Schengen, it got opt-outs. What's not to like about that? That never got put to the British people. So the referendum wasn't just lost in those few weeks in June 2016. It was lost over 25 years. And more than anyone, Boris set the tone for that.
I mean, including, let's face it, with the bus, which also was packed with lies, talking about hundreds of millions of pounds that were going to go from Europe into the National Health Service, which is frankly not true. But Fraser, given all of this, can anybody beat him?
I very much doubt it. I mean, Boris is an incredibly good communicator. This is his huge skill. He comes out with these great sound bites. In fact, I've been counting. You've said 5 of them already tonight. Boris quotes. He's very quotable. When he says things, they resonate. And that's a great skill for a political leader to have. He's sort of, and the comparison, I often think of him as being a bit like Donald Trump. I'm no great admirer of Donald Trump, by the way. But Trump has this ability of bending the universe towards him. You switch on the TV and it's all about what Trump has said. It's the same with Boris. People just talk about him the whole time. Now, this is a very powerful political tool for a Conservative Party worried about 2 things. It's worried about Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party. Farage he's the biggest party in Britain right now, by the polls say Farage. Secondly, Jeremy Corbyn. Both of them are sort of populist figures. A lot of Tories say this: it takes a populist to beat a populist.
See, I'm hearing that the Tories are putting party ahead of country. I worry about that.
Let's be clear about this. The Conservative MPs, most of them loathe Boris. They're not choosing him as leader because they admire his integrity or his honesty or his sense of duty or because they think he can heal the country. They think he's the only person who can out-Farage when it comes to populism. Let me pick up on one point Fraser made earlier. You know, they think he's electable. They think he can make the Tories electable again. It is true that he won 2 terms as London mayor in a Labour-leaning city. But he beat a fairly unpopular incumbent. He took over at a time when London was booming. David Cameron, the Prime Minister, and George Osborne, the Chancellor, pumped money into London for the Olympics. He had the Olympics, which is a huge boon for any incumbent. I mean, it was pretty hard for him to do badly. Since then, he's taken the first really divisive decision of his political career, which was to come down in favour of leave. That has cost him an enormous amount of support in his absolute bastion, which is London. I don't think he is so electable anymore. There's an opinion poll in YouGov the other day that showed 28% thought he would make a good Prime Minister, 54% thought he'd make a bad one. That's higher than any of the other Tory candidates, in both categories, admittedly.
It's really an interesting story. We're going to have you both back on when this leadership contest is over. Fraser Nelson, Martin Fletcher, thank you very much indeed for joining us.